Ladies and gentlemen, boys, girls, innies, outies and betweeners, it's me, Dan, and welcome back to another PAP Reports, The Bad Bits. It's Friday the 16th of October 2020. Two senior Gwent police officers, Chief Superintendent Mark Warrender, Head of CID, and Temporary Assistant Chief Constable Mark Budden could be facing criminal charges after an investigation by the IOPC and an outside police force. The pair have been suspended and are accused of an alleged sex attack at a Chief Constable's leaving party after a female police constable complained. The IOPC have said that after a year-long probe, their file has been sent to the CPS to consider criminal charges against them. A spokesperson said the investigation carried out by Avon and Somerset Police, managed by the IOPC, into the conduct of senior Gwent police officers associated with the event in Cardiff on 28th of June last year, has concluded. Since completion of the investigation in July this year, we've decided to refer the matter to the Crown Prosecution Service to consider whether any criminal charges should be brought against any officer. Relevant material, including the investigation report, is in the process of being sent to the CPS for their consideration. All of the high-ranking police constables from the 1,300-strong Gwent force were invited to the leaving party for Chief Constable Williams, along with another Chief Constable from a neighbouring South Wales force. The police source said it is shocking. The last thing you expect is a crime at the Chief Constable's leaving party where all the senior officers would have been there. Really though? I think if you ask the public, they'll say that that's exactly what you would expect. A lot of police leaving dues are a bit boozy, and this was no different, but Julian Williams is a good chief and this will really upset him. He wouldn't want this to be linked to his name. A lot of officers are disgusted that there are double standards at top senior levels. So these days I'm not even sure this kind of thing shocks me anymore. But there we have it. Shit rolls downhill, obviously. An utterly depraved and twisted police detective from Kent Police has been found to have committed gross misconduct after he, like many police, tried to have a relationship with a vulnerable victim of crime. What makes this worse is that the crime she was a victim of was attempted rape, and so this sicko thought it was appropriate to send flirtatious messages, topless pictures, and trying to start a sexual relationship with her. 40-year-old Detective Sergeant Jonathan Pearce sent the messages via Facebook and is also accused of a serious failure to secure evidence after he deleted the messages. Pearce said messages he sent were light-hearted banter, never anything serious, and that he did not want a sexual relationship with her. He added he was just trying to make her feel better about herself and wanted to bring the alleged perpetrator to justice. Pearce appeared before a misconduct panel at Kent Police Headquarters on Monday, where he admitted misconduct but denies gross misconduct. The panel heard Detective Sergeant Pearce and the woman identified only as Miss A became friends on Facebook in September 2019 and started chatting online. The following month, she told him she had been the victim of an attempted rape. Miss A sent him screenshots of messages she had exchanged with the alleged attacker, including her telling them no means no. Hours after telling Detective Sergeant Pearce about the incident, she said to him, "You want me?" The panel heard. He replied, "Maybe a little bit." She also sent him a screenshot from a newspaper article about so-called sugar daddies. It sounds like she was a little messed up as well after the alleged rape, which is even more reason for Pearce to have done the right thing. David Mesling, bringing the allegations against our Detective Sergeant Pearce on behalf of Kent Police, said, "You said that you didn't have that kind of money, but asked what you would get." Detective Sergeant Pearce said he took it as light-hearted and his reply was not asking her for a sexual favour, although he accepted it could be read as that. In other messages, he told Miss A that if he were 20 years younger, he would have asked her out and sent her a topless photograph of his head and shoulders. Mr. Mesling added, "Knowing or believing Miss A to be a vulnerable person, you continued to attempt to enter into a sexual or emotional relationship with her." Pearce said, "We messaged and we talked and she felt more like my daughter as it went on. I didn't want a sexual relationship with her. I had a partner and children." Yeah, because that's known to stop police trying it on with vulnerable victims of crime, isn't it? When asked how the messages came to be deleted, he said it was purely accidental and he had meant to archive them. "I deleted them because I was stupid and pressed the wrong button," he said. Well, that alone should prevent him from being in the police, never mind a fucking detective, if it's so easy to press the wrong button on a Facebook message. Jesus. Bearing in mind that you have to press and hold the message and then move your finger down or up to the delete button and then confirm deletion. Cunt. But on the plus side, Pierce was found to have breached standards of professional behaviour by attempting to start a sexual or emotional relationship with someone that he knew to be a vulnerable person. The panel rejected his argument that he accidentally deleted messages from his phone, including screenshots of messages between the alleged victim and her attacker, which would have been critical evidence, and was thankfully fucked off, P45 in hand. The mother of a 5-year-old girl has been left devastated after the man who raped her child, 21-year-old Callum Haycock, was allowed to walk free from court by yet another paedophile protecting judiciary. The pedo cunt, Callum, was found guilty of raping a child under 13 at Worcester Crown Court on October the 1st. However, the judge, whose name mysteriously was omitted from the reports I've seen, only gave him a 3-year community order, 35 days rehabilitation, fined him £200 in order to pay £2,500 to the victim, although he was put on the sex offenders register for 5 years. And people are wondering why paedophiles keep reoffending when they literally get let off the most abhorrent crimes. Following his sentence, the girl's mother described how she saw no justice for her daughter and vowed to appeal the sentence at the High Court. She said, "I ran out of the court and slammed the court door behind me. As I walked out of the court, I just shouted, 'It's a fucking joke. I see no justice for my daughter in this.' We've appealed to the High Court in London. This has ripped our lives apart. We've had to have counselling. It's ruined our lives. It separated me and my partner because we both didn't know how to deal with it, so we took it out on each other." Speaking about her daughter, she said, "She's been incredibly brave. She gave evidence at the trial and everything. I'm immensely proud of her. She's one of the bravest little girls I've ever met. She will get over this, but she will never forget it. It will always be there, but she's not the sort that is going to let it ruin her life. She still smiles every day and gets on with her life. She does wet the bed, but we're going through counselling to try and sort that out," she says. She has difficulties forming relationships with strange men in her life, obviously. We told her that he'd got to pay her some money because he's got to pay her £2,500 compensation, and she turned around and said she wants to give it to the poor. The police were amazing with us, and so were the witness support. They were very supportive and patient, and they handled everything with dignity. And I'm glad that although the judge clearly has no fucking idea of what he or she was doing, the police dealing with the case in this instance, where by the sounds of it, the family had some of the decent ones dealing with their case. Now, when you hear about a member of the cloth here on the channel, you're immediately going to think another pervert or paedophile. And you're not wrong. But I bet you wouldn't have guessed that this alleged sicko is a woman vicar. That's right. 57-year-old Vicar Veronica Green from Marbury, South Cheshire, is to face trial next year over 5 offences of indecency with a child and 1 charge of indecent assault, all of which she denies and were alleged to have occurred in the 70s and 80s. Green has been suspended from her position as the priest in charge of Marbury with Tushingham and Whitewell. Keith Sinclair, the Bishop of Birkenhead, said the charges relate to a long time before Mrs. Green was ordained and are not related to her work as a church minister or school governor. In January, having received information from the police and in line with national church procedures, I suspended Mrs. Green from the church ministry. Since that time, she has remained and continues to be suspended. As we await the outcome of the legal process, we ask for prayers for all those affected by the news and situation. A 34-year-old ex-West Mercia police constable, Leighton Phillips, was found guilty following a trial at Cardiff Crown Court last month of sexual assault. Off duty at the time, Phillips spent the day drinking and watching the Wales v Italy rugby game in Cardiff on the 1st of February this year. On his way home, Phillips rubbed the legs of 2 females as they stood near him on a patch train. When challenged by the girl's father, Phillips replied, "I'm a police officer." Don't they all just love using that "I'm plod" card as if it's going to get them out of trouble? The incident was reported to British Transport Police and Phillips was arrested at Shrewsbury Station. After being found guilty last month, he appeared at Swansea Crown Court on Thursday the 15th of October to be sentenced. Judge Paul Thomas QC, who has presided over the trial, said he has been struck by Phillips's arrogance throughout. His arrogance on the train, his arrogance when arrested, his arrogance during interview, and his arrogance during the trial. The judge said even without the conviction, he believed the defendant, who had shown himself to be wholly unsuited to be a police officer. After the allegations, Phillips resigned from the force, and he has also been barred from rejoining. Judge Thomas said the kind of behaviour Phillips had exhibited on the train would have been disgraceful coming from anyone, let alone a serving police officer. He said your character, your career are in tatters, and that can be put down to one fact, and one fact only. Put simply, you had too much to drink. It was that drunkenness that caused you to behave in such an appalling manner. Or maybe it was because he's a fucking perv. Judge Thomas added the defendant had shown no remorse or insight into his behaviour, but had instead displayed nothing but arrogance. Judge Thomas said he was satisfied the incident had been a one-off episode in drink, and Phillips did not pose a threat to other females, and that he was satisfied the sentence recommended by the probation service was suitable. Phillips was sentenced to a 24-month community order, 20 days of rehabilitation, a 3-month curfew, and must sign the sex offenders register for 5 years. Following the conclusion of the hearing, Chief Constable Bangham said, despite admissions to gross misconduct and his resignation, he, Phillips, has limited his regret to a one-line statement which reads, "I am sorry this matter has caused embarrassment to the force of my family." There is no mention of his victims. The conduct of PC Phillips brings discredit to the force and undermines public confidence in it. But let's be honest, when do the police ever consider the victims of their crimes? They can't even say sorry when they get something wrong on the streets. They have to turn it into words of advice instead of admitting a mistake. A retired police detective from Lancashire Police has given evidence at an ICSA inquiry, stating that a senior officer instructed him not to arrest the now late Lord Janna because he was an MP. Lord Janna was subject to child sex abuse allegations dating back to 1955 during police investigations in the 90s and in the 2000s. ICSA is the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse. They have a YouTube channel which, although can be upsetting to watch and hear, is in fact very interesting. The retired detective said at the inquiry that Janna was given preferential treatment and that in general terms, at the time, historic inquiries were viewed as a pain within the police force and that senior officers did not consider them to be as important as they do now. He said that himself had believed that there was sufficient evidence to provide grounds for an arrest and that he had been very disappointed by the decision. He suggested that if he had been arresting a man on the street, he would have had plenty of evidence and would not have hesitated, but was told not to in this case. The retired detective was asked about whether or not Leicestershire Police carried out sufficient inquiries into the allegations made against Lord Janna. In response, he stated that he could have made more inquiries and accepted responsibility for not pursuing those that he now felt he ought to have pursued. He also stated that he was told by someone at some stage to stop inquiries and move on. Following Lord Janna's death in 2015, an official report by a retired High Court judge concluded that 3 chances in 91, 2002 and 2007 to put the former Leicester West MP on trial were missed because of mistakes by the police or prosecutors. The independent inquiry into child sexual abuse is investigating how public bodies handled the allegations against Lord Janna, who is said to have committed acts of abuse in children's homes, schools, a flat in London and in Parliament itself. The hearing, parts of which will be taking place in private sessions to protect victims' names, is continuing and expected to sit for about 3 weeks. His family insists he is innocent of all of the allegations. 2 utterly sick cunts who were sentenced to serve a minimum of 30 years in jail for a string of horrific sexual attacks on men, women and children are having their sentences reviewed. Normally I would be reporting this due to the review being about their sentences being too severe. However, in this interesting case, these 2 vile pieces of shit are having their sentences reviewed for being unduly lenient. 37-year-old Reynard Singer was sentenced at Manchester Crown Court in January for offences against 48 men. 136 of those were rape. 35-year-old Joseph McCann was jailed last year at the Old Bailey for 37 offences involving 11 women and children aged between 11 and 71. But the Attorney General's office says their life sentences with minimum terms of 30 years were unduly lenient, and have appealed against the case on the basis that the men should have instead received whole life orders, simply meaning life in prison with no minimum term, a sentence usually, supposedly, reserved for certain types of murderers such as child abductions or acts of terrorism. Solicitor General Michael Ellis QC told the court both cases involved sexual offending of the utmost gravity. He said McCann's offences were among the most serious sexual offences ever seen in our courts and were outside the scale of sexual offending normally seen. He said that Singer was the most prolific sexual offender ever seen in the British legal system. The judges were asked to consider whether the prolific and grave offending seen in the two cases had reached the highest threshold of their sentencing powers. McCann and Singer's defence obviously opposed the appeal, stating that although the crimes were extremely serious, the men could not be considered on an equal footing with the very worst cases of murder. I beg to differ. Most of these people's lives will have been ruined. In effect, the life they had before the offence has now died. The 5 Court of Appeal judges, including the Lord Chief Justice Lord Burnett and the President of the Queen's Bench Division Dame Victoria Sharp, are expected to give a decision at a later date. I think you all know my feelings towards animals such as this. In fact, I think the majority of sentences imposed on the sexual offenders are unduly lenient. I would be happy for sexual offences that are proven without doubt to have an absolute minimum term of 5 to 10 years per offence. But, that wouldn't be fair on the poor deranged cunts now, would it? Well, according to do-gooders who constantly ignore what the victims go through. Thank you so much to every single one of our channel supporters, whether you share, like, comment, subscribe, or support us financially. Your help is truly appreciated. And that's all I have for you. Today's Too Much for YouTube. Please like, share, comment and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts. I'm sure many of you will. And until next time, stay safe, look after each other, film the police and other officials, and have a fantastic weekend. Good night, all. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you like the content and you'd like to help support the channel, you can do so. In the description of every video there are some links to ways that you're able to help support the channel so I can continue putting out content. If you're unable to help us in that way, hit that subscribe button up the top there. If you haven't already, become a subscriber. That is support enough. Share the videos, comment, like, it all helps. If you're looking for something else to watch, up top there is my latest video. Down the bottom there is a video that YouTube recommends for you.